A while back, I did a video discussing the things in video games that nobody ever talks about. And since absolutely nobody watched that video, I figured, well, the next best thing to do would be to do another video just like that, only about something with an even more niche audience. Because if you've noticed, the one plan of this channel is to not have a plan or target audience or audience at all, really. Today I want to tackle wrestling. As you know, there are a ton of channels and blogs and podcasts and magazines and e-zines and you name it. There are people all over the internet, all over media that discuss professional wrestling, and that's cool. I'm a fan. There's a lot of fans out there. Lots of information to be had. I get it. But what I don't understand is why there are so many things that don't get discussed. Like, seriously, with decades and decades of things to choose from, and so many of these media outlets choose to talk about the same thing. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to take this opportunity to just share some things that you maybe haven't heard of, or if you have, it's very seldom, or it's been a long time and maybe you've forgotten. These are the moments or the people that just get overlooked all the time, that never get mentioned, that seem to have just been completely forgotten to time. I feel like they're due. This will be their moment in the sun, if you will. I just want to sit here and I want to present to you things in professional wrestling you probably didn't hear about.
Oh, nothing.
Survivor Series, 1997. Now, the actual Survivor Series tournament from that year was kind of a mixed bag. There were some ups, there were some downs, and honestly, that's how a lot of Survivor Series tournaments go, if we're being honest. But what a lot of you have probably forgotten is that there was a really compelling singles match on that pay-per-view. And I'm not talking about Steve Austin, Owen Hart, Snore. No. There was actually a championship match that night. And it was between, believe it or not, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Now, it wasn't the first time that they met up in the ring, but it was probably their best match. Certainly their most notable, in my opinion. It was, you get an ultimate showman and a masterful technician, and you put them in a ring together for the belt. I mean, you can't go wrong with a match like that, and it did not disappoint. And then, shocker of all shockers, Shawn Michaels won the belt, beating Bret Hart with Hart's own submission move. It was crazy. It was such a big match, and I guess people forget about it because they're too busy focused on the actual Survivor Series tournament. But seriously, go back, give it a look. You'd probably be really impressed with the match. I mean, it was such a big deal that Vince McMahon actually came out from the back to celebrate with the champion. It was awesome. You should check that one out. Survivor Series 1990. Okay, as I said with the last entry, it was a Survivor Series tournament, ups, downs, it was what it was. But this pay-per-view was notable not necessarily for a particular match, but a debut. And I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Yes, we remember the debut. We'll never forget it. It is carved into history. But I'm not actually talking about the gobbledygooker. I know. We waited to see what was in that egg for ages. And it finally hatched, and a giant turkey came out and he danced for a while, and it was great. It was epic. It was certainly memorable, but that's probably clouded you, and you may have forgotten that there was another debut on that same pay-per-view. Yeah, there were 2 debuts that night. The other debut was actually The Undertaker. And that was huge. It may not have seemed like a big deal at the time because obviously The Undertaker was new. As fans, we didn't know what to expect. But man, was that a good get for the WWE or WWF at the time, because just 1 year later, The Undertaker would go on to star in the blockbuster hit Suburban Commando. So the timing was perfect. CM Punk's Pipebomb Promo. Now, we're all aware that CM Punk is a huge AEW star now. But I bet some of you didn't know that he used to wrestle for the WWE for a while. He did, and I'm not really surprised that you may have forgotten, because after he left the company, people didn't really talk about him much. Like, he just sort of said, I'm done with the company, and yeah, people just seem to have forgotten about him, honestly, which is kind of a shame, because I thought he was pretty good, but, you know, you just never heard about him. His name never came up at all. But actually, while he was there, he cut a promo. And what made this promo so memorable, again, for me, I mean, I realize a lot of you have probably forgotten about it, but what made it so memorable for me is that a lot of it seemed like a shoot promo. And a shoot promo is what we insiders call, like, when something's real, when it's not scripted. And he was saying a lot of things that you wouldn't expect a wrestler to say on a show. Like, he was taking shots at John Cena. A bonus fact, did you know that Hollywood actor John Cena used to be a wrestler? Now you know that. But CM Punk was taking shots at him, and he even took some digs at Vince McMahon. He referenced Vince McMahon dying. And believe me, that was a big deal, because it seems so ludicrous, because we all know that Vince McMahon can't die because he feeds on the blood and dreams of the innocents. But either way, it's a pretty fun segment, and if you get a chance, you should try to see it. You'd be surprised at how good it actually was. The curtain call. So some of you might be aware of the fact that Madison Square Garden is referred to as the house that McMahon built. It's really significant to the McMahon family. And it's because so many professional wrestling events have taken place there. And it's good. It's good that wrestling has been there for so long, because without professional wrestling, I mean, I don't even know if Madison Square Garden would have survived, because I don't think anything else notable ever happened there. So honestly, I mean, thank God for wrist locks and drop toe holds. But the point is, there was an event at Madison Square Garden in which there was a tag team match, and after the tag team match, 4 of the performers hugged. And why this was a big deal is because 2 of the guys in the ring were heels, that's what we call the bad guys, and 2 of them were baby faces, and that's what, you know, the deep talk we call the good guys. And good guys and bad guys aren't supposed to be seen getting along. That's breaking, again, I probably shouldn't let so many of these insider phrases slip, but they broke what we call kayfabe. That's the part of professional wrestling that's kind of like scripted and pretend. And you weren't supposed to break kayfabe back then. And Vince was really mad, which I don't understand why, because they were all friends, and two of the guys were leaving for another company, and they all just wanted to say goodbye in a proper way, and I thought it was really sweet. But Vince was really angry. Unfortunately, because two of the guys were leaving, he couldn't punish them. And one of the guys was, the champ and a top draw, so he couldn't really do much to him. So unfortunately, the hammer, or sledgehammer, fell on Triple H. Like, he caught the brunt of all of it. And as for punishment, he was allowed to marry into the McMahon family and become top brass within corporate halls, and went on to be given creative control of the best TV product WWE has ever done. So I guess the lesson is, don't fuck with Vince. The plane ride from hell. Okay, so I'd started this script several weeks ago. As it turns out, I feel like maybe recently a lot of you have heard more than enough about this topic, so we're just going to move on. Vince Russo. Vince Russo is probably a name you've never heard. Maybe you've heard it, but probably not. And I actually get it, because Vince Russo was a writer, sometimes the head writer. He worked for WWE, then he went on to WCW, and then later he would work for other companies, but those were the two big ones he worked for. And it makes sense that you wouldn't have heard of him, because again, as a writer, his job was to stay in the back, right? The writers, put together ideas, they put together plans, they present it, and then the performers, the athletes, they go out, they do the work. Writers are to be seen, but not seen, if that makes sense. So, of course, you wouldn't know his name. But the simple fact of the matter is WWE and WCW saw some of their best stuff with him at the helm. He is the mastermind, right? Let's be honest. If it wasn't for Vince, not that one. If it wasn't for Vince, we might not even have the Monday Night Wars. Like, and now that he isn't really into the wrestling thing anymore, I feel like you don't have to hide as a writer anymore, Vince. Like, you can step out of the shadows. Let us see the face behind the genius. We can talk about him now. If you have heard his name, it's probably because I think memory serves. I think Jim Cornette may have mentioned him once or twice because they worked together a few times. I don't know why he hasn't talked about him more. To my knowledge, they got along pretty well. But yeah, I think it's time that we finally give some credit to Vince Russo. The Attitude Era. Wrestling has always gone through its ups and downs and its ebbs and flows, its peaks and troughs. There's good times, there's bad times. A lot of people, maybe not the majority, but a number of people tend to think that the best time in all of wrestling was WWE's Attitude Era. And this was about a 3 or 4 year stretch in the late 90s into early 2000s of just really fun wrestling. The primary players for the company at the time were guys like Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, Undertaker, Mankind, Kane, and so many others. So, it's kind of hard to go wrong when those are the people, leading your company. And the great thing about the Attitude Era was it was also going on at a time when across the way at WCW, they were seeing their own boom. They launched the NWO, which really took off for them over there. So you had the NWO on one side, you had DX on the other side, you had, you know, the Monday Night Wars, as we mentioned earlier, started up, and from that, sure, eventually WWE, you know, won out, but for a while there, it was a lot of fun to watch both companies. Also, interestingly enough, just real quick, I mentioned DX and NWO, and I just find it funny that, you know, I mentioned the curtain call a little earlier, and it was like, people said, like, the four guys that were pretty much single-handedly destroyed the image of wrestling, kind of helped lead the business to its biggest boom in history. So, yeah, those guys are assholes. But anyway, back to the point. The Attitude Era was a lot of fun, and I don't get why people don't mention it more. You never see it on Twitter or Facebook. Nobody ever brings it up. You know, that time period doesn't get mentioned a lot in like lists or articles or whatever, and it just seems strange because I know there were a few low points. You know, you had Mae Young giving birth to a hand, and you had the way women were treated constantly, and you had the homophobia, and you had the racism, which went anywhere from subtle to not so subtle to on your face. But I mean, other than all of that, it was great. Wrestlemania X-7. So it's no surprise that WrestleManias give us some of the biggest moments in wrestling. It's the Super Bowl of wrestling, right? And we've had some great moments. We all remember Daniel Bryan winning the title. We all remember the streak ending. We all remember the slam. But I'm going to ask you to stop for a second and try to think about WrestleMania X-7 for a little bit. I know, you don't want to think about it because you didn't like it, or you can't come up with a reason to go back and rewatch it. But hear me out on this one. It actually deserves a little more love. Not only did we get an amazing pre-Mania heat, but we got to see Grandmaster Sexay in action. We got to see Right to Censor in action. We had a gimmick battle royal. We got the fucking Goon. I mean, what else could you want? Well, have no fear, because there is more. There are so many stars on display in that WrestleMania. What really blows my mind is how we get just a little bit of a glimpse at so many people that would go on to be massive AEW stars. We got to see Chris Jericho, Taz, Paul White, Christian Cage, The Hardys, Shane McMahon. Like, dude, like well before they were huge stars, we got to see them at this WrestleMania. Now, I know the TLC match is a little overdone. It gets a little cringy and a little over the top, but there's still some fun to be had. And the whole thing is threatened to come to a halt with a long-winded, predictable slog between The Rock and Austin. But if you can get past that and just look at what the future was going to hold for so many of these guys and how talented they were even then I really think you should go back and give that WrestleMania a watch. Oh, and a bonus point, the Undertaker Triple H match at that WrestleMania was one of the incredibly rare times where a Triple H match actually went more than 15 minutes. Check it out. David Arquette. WCW is a legendary, was a legendary wrestling promotion. Some of the greatest talent in the world went through there, and they had some absolutely just crazy good champions. They had Sid Vicious. They had Jeff Jarrett. They had David Arquette. That's right. You heard me. David Arquette was WCW champion. I know you'd forgotten about that. And why wouldn't you have? Nobody ever seems to want to mention it. But David Arquette was the champ. Now, to be fair, Mr. Monica really only won it because it was kind of a tie-in thing for the Ready to Rumble movie, but that doesn't matter. He went out there and he busted his ass and he became champion. And I just wish people would respect that more. You'll see it pop up from time to time. For example, not too terribly long ago, the channel Cultaholic did a list of the greatest WCW champions. And of all the WCW champions, they listed David Arquette second to last. Second to last. Deputy Dewey. Are you kidding me? Show some respect. Fuck you, Pacitti. Actually, I've obviously never met the guys at Cultaholic, and they all seem really nice and thoughtful and really good at their jobs. And I'm actually a big fan of their channel, and you should probably check out their stuff because they're really good. So, unfuck you, Pacitti? Speed round of wrestling things that you've never heard of. King of the Ring 1998. Yes, people want to go on and on and on and on about Ken Shamrock winning King of the Ring at the 98 tournament. And that's great. That's fine. He earned it. But there was another match at that pay-per-view. And let's not forget, it was Undertaker's first singles win in a Hell in a Cell match. You'd really think people would occasionally mention that particular match once in a while. Rock versus Austin. The Tooth Fairy fought Mr. Nanny, and Canadians fucking loved it. The Invasion. Winner, WWE. Losers, WCW, ECW, and the fans. Hogan joins NWO. On this night, the New World Organization was born. Shockmaster debut. Aren't you a little fat to be a stormtrooper? Judy Bagwell on a pole match. What a man won't do to protect his mother. WCW and the 83 weeks. If Eric Bischoff's erection lasts for more than a year and a half, immediately consult a Vince Russo. The Yes Movement. As the authority, the fans made an executive decision. And as a result, the McMahons have been punishing us ever since. There you go, folks. I hope you learned something. I hope that I was able to jog your memory and remind you about some things that you'd completely forgotten, or maybe even told you some things you didn't know. Because, again, these are not the kind of things you hear about all the time. These are the things that get tucked away and lost in the cracks. And it's a shame, really, because some of this is important stuff. And I don't think we should forget about it. They really should be talked about more. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you like what we did here, I do videos when they get done, and there will be more. at some point. And when there is, like, you should come back and watch that too. That'd be cool. Until then, thank you for watching this. I appreciate it more than you could possibly know. And as always, don't be a dick. Vince Russo!